Welcome to my latest sketchbook tour. It's number 34 in my collection. Not only will you see the complete range of my sketches, but I'll also be revealing my top 10 favourite pieces and the stories behind each of them. Hi, I'm Omar. I'm an artist, illustrator and author. I've been keeping sketchbooks for 8 years and I really love sharing what I do. You might have seen the beginnings of my sketchbook in a previous sketchbook tour. I'll link it in the description below. These were old Patreon sessions with Emma Carlisle. These were 10 minutes each. She usually has a theme, and so it was more like a sea theme. We come to number 1 in my favourite pieces of this sketchbook. We have a double page spread, but my favourite pieces are actually the fishermen and the boats below it. I think it's because I was starting to understand how to portray connections within a story, within a narrative, by using colour. You can see his oilskin is kind of a yellow orange, and I brought some of those elements through into the piece below. However, that lighthouse is more of a cooler red, and if I painted it again I would definitely be using much warmer reds, just so that all the pieces really hang together. Overall, really lovely balanced pieces, and I love the expression on that fisherman's face. These panels were from another Emma Carlisle Patreon session. I really wanted to paint that mushroom especially. However, I think I put too much pressure on myself. Even though they were timed studies, I really wanted them to look good, so probably that's where it all went wrong. Not overly fond of this piece, however, my one takeaway is those colours look really great together. This is number 2 in my favourites list, and these panels were from another set of Emma Carlisle narrative pieces. And I'd actually seen this man standing in the glass house on Pinterest before, so I was really looking forward to painting it, and I am so delighted with how it turned out. There's something mysterious about it, the beautiful elegance of the glass as it drifts upwards. There's light there as well. I think I've really captured the mood. It's very contemplative. I almost think that could have been Mr. Darcy standing there. Overall, I love the way that I've been able to bring together all the different elements, especially with the limited colour palette. We have the smoky teal with the dusky salmon pink. Another time studies. It says here in my notes it was 40 minutes in total, another Emma Carlisle Patreon and complete. I don't work this small either, so this is my favourite, this one here, even though it's the smallest. I think it's a church in Iceland, and I love that pop of green. I wish I'd been able to introduce just a tiny hint into this one here, but I'm learning. Favourite number 3, this is Lake Carezza in the Italian Dolomites. It was a series of images that appeared on Landscape Art Club, which is a weekly prompt on Instagram, and every week they have images of different locations around the world. I thought this was a great opportunity to try out a new watercolour pan, which was Cobalt Turquoise by Winsor & Newton. There's a real simplicity of line here with the colour pencil defining the ridges of those mountains. So what I would have done was lay down rough watercolour shapes and then added that colour pencil, which looks to be a French grey, and I will be making a video about my Luminance colour pencils very soon. I do think there's something incredibly serene and peaceful about this, and this lake is going to be in my magic jam jar of places to visit in future with my sketchbook, so I can paint it for real. This is favourite number 4. You saw that cobalt turquoise I was using in that lake, and I was really excited by the possibility of using that colour again. So I created my own time study. I just searched for reference photos from Unsplash, and I bought that lovely Quinn Gold in as well in the background. There's a real energy and movement in that cockerel, and I know it's not realistic and I very rarely draw birds, but I really want to do a lot more farmyard type animals, I feel. This was a warm-up session for another Emma Carlisle Patreon, and it says here 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. I really surprised myself, if I'm honest, that I was able to create these, this page. It was literally 10 minutes worth, which came in very handy because this was the warm-up for this piece and this was the warm-up for this piece. And it's something that isn't often talked about on social media. I think, oh, she's just done it immediately. But these type of studies, I know they look like hot messes, are really important. I learnt so much from this particular piece, so it is sitting at number 5 in my favourites. You'll see that I used a faint pencil, which is fairly unusual for me, but I really wanted to look at the composition and lighting of this piece, so I put particular emphasis on the highlights, and it's something that I'm naturally curious about, and I'm able now to see very clearly where the areas of highlights and the areas where I want to use the most contrast, and that's why I'm able to capture some of this luminosity, because I have looked at it for so long. Now, these were some more warm-ups, and I think I had something else to do, so I couldn't finish off the rest of the Patreon session, but I did have the reference images that Emma had chosen, so I decided to do this by myself. It says it was 20 minutes plus 5 minutes of faff, so I imagine that's for both of them. This still life with the jug is number 6 in my list of favourites. I still can't believe I painted that jug. I completely surprised myself with how dimensional it looked, and it's the handle and that shadow that is actually my favourite part. One niggle would be that I wish I had left a little bit more of the paper showing so that you could have better highlights on those pears, just to help them stand out. Looking back on this, I think I wanted to use the same palette, as in the same colours. So you've got sort of this deep aubergine reds coming through, weaving its way from the vase through to the cherries and stuff. And again, the highlights on the cherries really make them pop. Elements of the glass as well, the crystal. I look at it now and think, wow, Omar, you did a good job there. So really pleased with those two. Back to another landscape. I found these really difficult because there was so much going on. There was so much texture. I did this one first and I overworked it. I've gone over and over it again with the Posca pen, and I realised that these row of houses here, that my contrast was a little bit wrong. When I looked at the reference image very carefully, these houses were much more in contrast. So when I came to do this one, I was a lot more mindful, and I think this one is a lot more successful because visually and also compositionally it gives you a sense of the area. This is in France. I wanted to do these as time studies by myself. These weren't part of Emma's Patreon. This time I wanted to explore dark sap green and also the oranges, and it's a beautiful palette that really speaks to me, and I enjoyed this tremendously. The still life with the oranges on the right is number 7 in my favourites. There are considerably more oranges and leaves in the reference image that I use, so I had to really simplify it down. I think overall it's a lot more balanced with the oranges really popping out. And the cloth is not perfect, but I'm glad that I was able to give some movement in that. It's something that I often don't paint. And I want to say, if you've enjoyed this content so far, remember to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and also leave me a comment. Let me know what is your favourite piece in this sketchbook. I would really love to know. Now let's carry on. These were still lifes from a Skillshare class, a friend of mine called Nina. I am always going to be an eternal student. I am just so enthusiastic and excited by various things, like this highlight on that vase. the curve of that vase is like, oh, I was so excited to capture it. For fairly similar palettes as well, you can see a bit of this red coming through here, and I wish I'd made that apple a tiny bit more redder, but you know, I'm just nitpicking now. Really, really loved these. There's something very calming about this double page. This was another project for a Skillshare class that I watched by Alana Cartier. It's acrylic gouache, and if you know my work, I hardly ever use gouache, and it's something that I want to introduce to my work. This is probably a little bit tight, this area in particular. My favourite part is actually the landscape in the background. There's something very textural, and I think I was using like a square tip brush for that, and it was a lot more expressive up here than this was. The swans and the water was a bit more controlled. This particular page was for Katie Moody's Patreon. She had been to the Met Museum and taken loads of photos to use as references. This might not look like much, but these were 2 timed studies, 2 minutes each. These were Degas bronzes. I haven't done any kind of figure work in forever, and I've been able to capture the form really quickly, and it shows that I still got a bit of talent in that area. There are lovely motifs on these vases and various decorative elements on, but I loved capturing some of these details. Again, time studies, they must have been like 10 or 15 minutes. I was apprehensive about capturing landscapes from the masters. This was a Van Gogh piece and this was a Cézanne piece. However, I had so much fun. I think these were probably about 25 minutes maybe, or 20 or 25 minute studies. This Van Gogh landscape is number 8 on my favourites list. I honestly didn't think I would be able to capture such a unique and beautiful painting. I had been to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, and I have a deep respect for this artist. Adored doing this, and I might actually have to come back and do some more. I might have to keep a sketchbook of just me trying to imitate the masters because I learned so much about depth and contrast. I did go to the Cézanne exhibition at the Tate Modern like a month after completing this, and oh, Cézanne was just amazing. One thing I will add is most of this is coloured pencil. Some of it is brush pen, but I love the textural qualities that I was able to bring in. These are more studies for Emma Carlisle's Patreon. The ochre parts is actually acrylic pen. This 5-minute study is number 9 in my list of favourites. Even though it's only a study, I learnt so much about quick decision making. You don't have to capture everything, you just need to grab areas that interest you. There is a lot of gestural work, and it's more evident on this armchair. Working fast, and I can see why other artists love using acrylic markers, because you just slap them down. This was the same session, again, acrylic marker in the background. Oh my gosh, I was like, whoa, this is a little bit, risky for me. I don't do things like this, but I had the best fun. More Landscape Art Club. This was Lighthouse's coastal part of Germany. I feel these are a little bit overworked. The sunsets in particular, I think this one's better, but this one was overworked where I added a little bit too much orange. I wish I'd left a little bit more white. It's supposed to be. Somebody said, I thought you were painting like somebody holding a whole load of brushes. It's actually asparagus. So maybe I could have made them a little bit more obvious. My favourite part are these trees in the background. I think the way they just flow into each other, and that's one of the joys for me of just watching watercolours flow into each other like that. I wanted them to be better, but there we go. We all have these problems. Another 2 images from Landscape Art Club. I had learnt to leave a little bit more white and not to overwork from the previous pieces. Just this little tiny dog there. That's really nice element.
Now these two I painted when I was up in Norfolk. I was visiting friends, and beautiful, beautiful carpets of snowdrops everywhere.
These snowdrops are number 10 on my favourites list. I still remember that morning very vividly. It was beautiful walking through these glades. I managed to put down the watercolour base layer for both of these during my visit at the park, and then when I got back to their house I was able to apply that grey in the background. It's acrylic marker, and I think it really adds a great deal of contrast.
And on this page it's mainly the luminance pencils with a bit of the Kuretake marker, and I think this was Katie Moody's Patreon. I wish that I had simplified things down. There's obviously a lot going on, and one of my favourite techniques is just to use negative space to highlight some of the leaf shapes there. This is part of the same Patreon. It's part of this sort of narrative, this tree, this stately home garden type thing. We've got the greenhouse and the elements inside the greenhouse. I think these two work well because I did leave a lot of white space, and I've left parts of this glove and the secateurs and this jug unpainted, so I think that makes the page quite luminous. This, I would say, is one of my favourite sketchbooks. I learned such a lot, and I am so thankful to Katie and Emma Carlisle, and also Natalie and the lady who runs the Landscape Art Club, because I would not have been able to capture some of this without their help.
I really hope you've enjoyed this sketchbook tour. Please remember to like, subscribe and leave a comment. Let me know which was your favourite piece. Until next time, stay amazing.